Am I unmuted? Are we good? Cool. My name is Bill. I'm alcoholic. My drink date, sober date, whatever you want to call it, is January 3rd, 1970. I've always had a group. I've always had a sponsor. I sponsor others. And I have been sponsored by both men and women. And I have sponsored both men and women. Primarily when there were none available in my market. I'm a member of the Jaywalkers group in Glen Allen, Virginia, which is like a little suburb of Richmond, Virginia. I got sober in New York, relocated to the West Coast for 5 years, and then moved here to be part of my family caring for elderly parents. That's a quick thumbnail. I took my first drink at the age of 11, 12, sixth grade, whenever you become an altar boy in the Catholic faith. And I studied my Latin, and I knew my Latin, and I was assigned to serve a funeral during a weekday, last minute, if you will. And we were in the church, and the church was surrounded by my grammar school. And just before the mass started, the five of us were on the altar boy side of the altar, and the priest was on the priest side of the altar. We were alone, five of us, sitting in a circle, and we passed this little decanter, well, little half-gallon decanter of Christian Brothers Gold. We called it Christian Brothers Gold. And I was third, and when it got to me, I took a guzzle and went around the circle, and it came back to me, and I took another soda pop guzzle, maybe 9, 10 ounces altogether. This is what happened. First, I qualified because I had an adverse reaction to the first drink. The first guzzle went down and lit the pilot light, and I was beginning to get all warm. And then the second one came around and increased that. And my history growing up, I'm a birth defect child. I had a cleft palate at birth, and I survived it and was closed at birth by a plastic surgeon, and had surgeries during my 15th year to rebuild bone structure and skin structure in my face. And I grew up the ugly duckling in my grammar school. I looked different. I sounded different. I was also short. I was about 1.5 feet tall until I got to the 6th grade. I was always first on the size places lines. Those of you that are not Catholic, when we grew up and we were in school, the nuns would line us up in size places. The midgets in the front and the NBA futures in the back. And later on in AA, when I began to learn about defects of character and meeting other people, I learned that the giants in the back thought the same way that I did in the front, just different words. So looking different, sounding different, being short, I just assumed by the way the kids treated me, taunting me, calling me names, dragging me through mud puddles where I had to go home at lunch to change into another uniform, that I was different and I was not like them. After this second drink, that all went away. Bulk erased. Only to be visited during events like this, where I'm telling my story and I'm rehashing the past. The first great power of example I had about alcoholism was one of the priests in my church. At the age of 13, I went home and kissed my mother hello, and I had been drinking because I had been serving Mass that morning. I served 3 Masses. That's the limit for Sundays. And I've been drinking all morning, and my mother accused me of drinking and sent me back across the street to resign from the Altar Boy Society. So I sought out this priest that I'm talking about and asked him if I could go to confession. Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. It's been 2 weeks since my last confession. I drink the altar wine. And Father's spiritual, broad knowledge of this experience was, that was his answer to that confession. And nothing happened. There was no prayer, no penance, no bashalalaying, none of that Catholic stuff. And he began to say the 6 a.m. Mass every day, 6 days a week. And I began to serve 6 a.m. Mass 6 days a week for the same reason, so we could start our day off with a blast. And Father would always be there before me. So he got to drink first. I had to wait until after Mass, unless he sent me off the altar to refill the wine cruet so he could have a second and third cocktail, if you will. And Father Ben was his name. He was my first power of example, as I said. He died a very slow, ongoing, painful, alcoholic death. He had several operations taking limbs off, pieces of limbs. He was missing in action a lot. Drinking was never mentioned, but I knew it was the drinking. God bless you, Father Ben. The other great power of example for me was the best looking girl in my class growing up. He used to be the chief of police in our town, and he developed a drinking problem, got fired from the police department in my town, and basically drank himself to death. And I would drink with him when I was in high school, my sophomore year in high school. On the weekends, I would meet him on the roof at the high school where I went to, and we would drink. He had his, I had mine. And then his job for the day was to put the lines down on the football field for the big game that afternoon. And the goal line was there, and the 10-yard line, 20, and the third, no 40, 50-yard line. Then the 40-yard line started to wiggle, and the 30-yard line only went halfway across the field, no 20, a 10-yard sort of swooper, and the other goal line. And you could tell how the drinking was affecting him by his job on the field. And he died drunk on the streets in New York. And neither of them had the wonderful experience, wonderful gift that I've been given by being exposed to and coming into AA. I often think of both of them. The next big event was I missed a lot of school in my junior year, and in and out of hospitals, in and out of surgeries. I consider my plastic surgeon my first sponsor. George Crickelaire was his name, and we went to have our first meeting with him, me and my father, and he had a lot of pictures taken of me, black and white photos, all different. And he sat there at the table with us with a paper doll scissors, cutting up the pictures and pasting and gluing and taping, and put together pictures of what I was going to look like after the surgery. And he says, now I have to tell you that you're going to have to stop drinking and stop smoking and do a little track after school, maybe 3 days a week to get ready for this year, because there's two things you have to consider. Number one, if there's any nicotine in the cell or any alcohol in the cell, or two of them together, it will retard healing, and we might have to do one or two of these procedures 2 or 3 times. So I behoove you to get off the alcohol and get off the smoking and build up some air so you can get through this year with me. And I chose to do that. I made the right decision for the wrong reasons. and I gave up drinking, and I gave up smoking, and very successful speech result. You can understand me. A lot of cleft palates you can't understand because their speech is very windy, and I have a 4th degree bilateral cleft all the way back to the throat. So it was pretty massive. And because of my parents, my surgeries, and my doctors, I have a great speech result. Then I went back to school, and they would not let me repeat my junior year at the school I was going to. So I switched schools from Catholic all-boys school, literally no women, to public school, which had fully developed 16-year-old women sitting in class with me, both sides. And that was a shock to me, culture shock. And I might have to put a parenthesis in here to let you know that I also had an ongoing, expensive pornography addiction during those years. I used every dime that I got from my paper route to make the train trip down to New York to buy porn. And parenthesis closed. I've recovered from that with help from one of my early sponsors. So I had identity issues making this switch into public school. So I assigned myself the task of being the music man, the DJ man, the record man. So I began to play records in my cafeteria at lunchtime, and it worked out really great. In the beginning, I had to record them so the principal could listen to the recordings to make sure I wasn't selling black market stuff during backward messages in the tapes and all of that stuff. But once he got the drift that I was legitimately playing music at the cafeteria for lunch, he let me do it live. And that's when I really got my juices about the DJ thing. People came up and started asking for requests. The teachers loved it because I began to make their announcements for them, they knowing that the kids would hear me read the announcement as opposed to the principal reading the announcement at 3 o'clock announcements. And it really worked well. The fraternity in my high school invited me to play their Christmas party, and they gave me cash, and they let me drink all night, and that kind of ended my education because I knew I was going to be playing records for a living. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know what it was going to happen, but I liked the idea of being in front of the crowd that's dancing to the music that I'm playing. And I started out playing in a nightclub that the men's fraternity rented and ran and kept the gate. And I played band breaks there behind the curtain with 2 little turntables and a wire that I plugged into one of the band's amplifiers. And then one night, the band got into some really good drugs and were so stoned they could not walk. So I said to the club owner, I can hold them. I can do my regular thing, but, all night. But I want band money. Whatever you're paying the band, that's what I want. And he agreed because the club was packed and I was able to hold the room. And I played band breaks for probably the next 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, all around Westchester County, New York. And there was a band called the Saints and Sinners, and they were the biggest act in my market. And Kevin was the leader of the band, and he played piano with his right hand and electric bass with his left hand and sang lead. And he and I were booked together by the fraternity again into the biggest nightclub in Westchester County at that time, the 42 Club. And his first set, he played his best stuff and nobody danced. And then I came on for 15 minutes with my little rinky-tinky speakers with a microphone in front of them, and all the kids danced to the Motown. I played Motown that night a lot of Motown dance stuff. Next break, he's sitting in the booth with me, asking questions about the records and how do you do this, and he took me on the road with him to play his band breaks whenever he went out to do colleges, and that's where I really got my chops. And right around this time, 67, I began to drink a lot, drink quantity. Here are the milestones: wine, bad hangovers, then wine and beer, bad hangovers, different hangovers, then 7 and 7s, that's Seagram's 7 with 7 Up in the bars wherever I was performing, different hangover. Then I drank scotch once in a while, different hangover. And the last year and a half of my drinking, I drank Southern Comfort warm directly out of the bottle until my last drink. And I met Janis Joplin in 1968, and she was the Southern Comfort queen. And I was emceeing a concert that she was performing at, and she arrived at the Westchester County Center, which is the big concert hall in my town. And she looked around and she noticed, I'm there already when she arrives, that there's no Southern Comfort for her. And she goes, do you know who's running this thing? I go, yeah, his name is Ron. He's right over there. That's the promoter. She goes, go tell him I will not go on unless there's Southern Comfort here. So I went over to Ron and I said, Southern Comfort. He goes, you got to get me some Southern Comfort in here. So I called one of the clubs that I performed in locally, just down the street from this concert hall. And I said, close the bar, bring a case of Southern Comfort, come to the stage door, you're all going to get to be in. And he did, and she was happy, and she passed the jug to me and said, you want a swig? And I took a swig. It was like drinking cough medicine. It was like I was under the influence of entire mouth Novocaine, if you can identify with that. And I got to introduce her 40 minutes later after her band sets up. So really, that was the beginning of the end. Drinking a lot, drinking quantity, carrying liquor with me. I had a 2-quart rule. If I opened one of the 2 quarts, I had to get another quart because I knew I'd run out by the end of the night. So let's see. That brings us up to the 1969 Woodstock era. Woodstock was in August of 1969. And a couple months before that, in March, I had a bad week. I had a car accident. I had my parents asked me to move out of the house because of my drinking. And I was fired from my radio job as a production engineer for this radio station, which was part of a network. I was fired for drinking there. And all in 1 week. And this got my attention. I began to think about the drinking, thinking about drinking less. Maybe I'll only drink on Thursdays. Maybe I'll only drink at night. Thinking stuff. Didn't change my drinking right away. About a month later, I stopped drinking for 10 days and picked up a drink, and it was like falling off a cliff. So I understand what the first drink is before I came to my first meeting. And then I had another 21-day stretch without drinking where I stopped drinking. And again, picked up the drink and drank quarts, 2-3 quarts a day till the end of my drinking. The interesting thing about the quantity is it didn't change anything that I was doing drink-wise. It didn't change the hangovers. It didn't change. Oh, another piece I need to mention here. In between these 2 dry periods, I met a guy named Matty the Caddy. He caddied for Westchester Country Club, and he lived on the golf course. He would sleep in different sand traps. And I met him at the picturesque Senator Hotel in downtown White Plains, my city, which was the Skid Row of our city. And I was talking to him about hangovers. He'd go, "Oh, I don't have them." "You don't have them?" "No, I just drink all the time. If I wake up at night, I drink. If I get up at I drink around the clock, no more hangovers." So the last 3 or 4 weeks of my drinking, I didn't have any hangovers because I was drinking all the time, which brings me up to the beginning of the end. I had a 4-day New Year's Eve party that began on New Year's Eve and lasted until Saturday morning. And very bizarre 4 days. About 400 people came through my apartment. They all knew that I drank. They were drug users. They were using marijuana and hash at that time, very popular drugs. And as they came through, they left me quarts, and I moved them into the bathroom, which was where my bar was, so I wouldn't fall down. I would sit on the floor. And the very bizarre 4 days. I had no food. I hadn't eaten in a while, so I didn't need plates or pans or forks or any of that. So the cabinets above my sink in this palatial one-room apartment, 16 by 16, I put my speakers and my stereo up in those cabinets, and I had a copy of Led Zeppelin 2, and my copy of Led Zeppelin 2 skipped for about 5 days. Holonik, 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 Holonik. 2 days of that. Weed, weed, weed. 10 hours of that. Everybody in the building thought I was dead. Lady upstairs came down and read the name off my door and called everybody in the phone book. Found my parents. They came with my sister and her boyfriend. And when I came to, seeing them in front of me, I knew that it was an inner being knowing that I had had my last drink. I was done with the drinking. Not going to do that anymore. But I did not know how to live. I had a shelf in my shower for the 2 glasses so I could drink while I'm showering. Everything I did was connected to drinking. So that was on a Saturday. I had a limbo week between my last drink and my first meeting. I'm very grateful. I went back to work that Tuesday, and they had a meeting about me, and they put me on final warning. They told me if I drank or missed time, I was done. And coming out of that meeting on Tuesday, I met my union delegate, Tipsy, and he explained to me that if I tried to do something about my drinking, that he could protect my job. Now, Tipsy was 5 foot everything, front to back, left to right, tall. He weighed about 600 pounds. He never got sober. He died on the streets of my town, but he got a lot of guys to their first meetings, including me. And he gave me a number, 212 number. This guy's name is George. He knows about drinking. I called George, and he was a third liner in the Bell system, New York Telephone, and he was sober, and he told me his story. And I knew I was just like him, right down to I was not married and didn't have a wife to find my booze, but that was the only thing that he had that I didn't have. But everything else I knew about. And I learned from him. He explained to me his blackouts. I didn't know what they were, but once he told me about the second or third one, I knew I was having them all day, every day. And at the end of this conversation, he got me. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, I got a job a couple of weeks before this working on the frame for the phone company. And this is where the intervention came, was through the phone company. And he got me talking about my tomfoolery, the craziness that I did while I was working. And I'm telling him my coolest stuff, little things, within the building. He stopped me and he said, "That's nothing. I lost a telephone pole, a 65-foot telephone pole to be cut in half at the site, a cable well, that big spool that they tow behind the cherry pickers with the cable in it, and a cherry picker, 102 feet of Western Electric equipment, never recovered, probably in a river somewhere." My first thought hearing this guy's cooler than me. He did bigger stuff than I did. I got to listen to him. He knows I don't. So at the end of the conversation, right after this tomfoolery discussion, he said, "I know some people in your city. I'll make some calls and see if I can get you into AA." And that sounds funny now, but that's how it was in those days. You had to know somebody to get into AA. And that was Tuesday. Saturday morning, Ed called me from the Crane Road group, and he asked me 3 questions. Are you having a problem with drinking? I'd never heard that before. I have the right guy. This is Bill, right? Yes, that's 2. Third one is, do you know where the Sherwood Diner is? Yes, I'll meet you there in an hour. And he hung up. And we had no secret sign. I don't know how I'm going to know him. It was long before Mission Impossible, where I would carry a yellow umbrella in, and he would have his kerchief on his eyeglasses, and I open my umbrella, and he'd take the kerchief, and I would know it. None of that. So I'm walking into this diner at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's jumping with people who hunt, stopping to get their coffee and butter roll before they go. And I walk in the front door trying to figure out how I'm going to meet this guy. And I hear from over in the corner, "Hey, over here." Me? Get over here. Right over. And I said, "How did you know it was me?" He said, "Sit down." Well, that didn't answer the question, but I'm a sick man. So I sat down. And he told me his story. And 30, 35 minutes, a lot of blackouts, a lot of hangover talk. And, he had a guy with him, Terry, I was Terry's first 12-step call. Terry H. Good. He's gone now about 10 years. And Terry was the baby in the market, the AA market, the Westchester County market. And he was 37 and I was 23. So I became the new baby. And Terry was still pretty whacked out from the effects alcohol had on him. So I picked him up and drove Terry to my first meeting at the the Hartsdale Ardsley group Saturday night. And I was walked right into the front of the room and introduced to Vinny. And Vinny, Sicilian Italian, good looking olive skin, 5'6", all muscle, 260. He got right up in my face. And he said, "If you ever drink, I'll find out about it. You're not going to drink." Well, I knew I wasn't going to drink anywhere near Vinny if I had to. And that's the toughest he ever was. He said, "Come on," took me back to the coffee urn. I'd only seen him in diners. I'd never worked one, with the glass tube that shows you how much coffee's in it. So he took a real cup, put it under the spout, and put maybe 2/3 coffee in the cup. He put his first sugar in the cup and a little milk and got it all stirring and going and stirring. Then he put the second sugar in. He said to me, "Did you see that?" "Yes." "Can you remember that?" "Yes." "You sure?" "Yes." And I kid now, I didn't know that I was going to be talking about the coffee for my whole life. But I knew how to make Vinny's coffee. He goes, that's how I like my coffee. Everywhere we go, you get my coffee. I'll give you the signal and you get my coffee. That's how it started. And another parenthesis, I believe me deciding to get Vinny's coffee is me stepping into AA and being in AA. 3 weeks later, Al was at his first meeting and Al's sitting in my seat. And I see my seat's occupied. Vinny, Vin. Somebody's sitting in my seat. He goes, yeah, that's Al. I brought Al tonight. You're going to sit in my seat. Oh, okay. So the three of us are sitting on the front row aisle, and Vinny leans across me to introduce Al to me. This is Bill. He was just at his first meeting a couple weeks ago. Right, Bill? Yep. So I said, come on, Al. Took him back to the coffee urn. Put the cup under the coffee urn, get the coffee going with first sugar, second sugar, milk. This is how Vinny likes his coffee. Now, since I've been getting Vinny's coffee, I haven't had a drink. There's something to this coffee thing. So if I'm never here, you know how to get Vinny's coffee for him. Okay, good. Let's go back to the seat. So I'm all puffed up. I tell Vinny that Al knows how to make you coffee now. Vinny got very upset. He said, stand up, stand up. I stand. He stands right in front of me again, right close. He goes, you will always be here. You will never not be here. One of us will come and get you and bring you here. You get my coffee. Got it? Yes. Sit down. Got a lot of that sit down stuff. Get in the car. I thought that was part of AA. Get in the car. Next 18, 20 months, we went everywhere Vinny would speak, and I'd ride along in the seat behind him. He's driving. He's got the rearview mirror on me, carrying on the conversation with me, making eye contact with the mirror. And he was never a sponsor. He was just somebody that took me to meetings, and I went to the diners with. And I've been through the steps 5 times with 5 different sponsors. The last time I went through touched on everything. The first 4 times I went through the steps, I used the autobiography method. And Forrest, my sponsor, I met Forrest on the West Coast. I moved out there in '94. I was out there for 5 years working at a record label. And he said, so you've never worked the 4th step out of the book? No. Good. We're going to work the 4th step out of the book with the 4 parts, the resentment list, the fear list, the sexual inventory, and the ideal relationship. We're going to write them all out. And I suggest you do a list tonight, put meetings between the lists. And when you're done, you call me. And that's what I did. Went back over the hill to his home. I lived in Pleasanton, California, which is East Bay, south of Oakland. And he lived in Santa Cruz, which is over the Santa Cruz Mountains, and about an hour and a half each way. And I drove to his home, and we're sitting between the cars in his garage, and I give him the list, 4th step list. He goes, what's that? I said, it's my 4th step. He goes, I don't get that. Oh. He goes, what's your experience? I said, every sponsor I've had has taken it from me and looked at it or didn't look at it. I don't know. And I basically would get stuck after 5 each time I would go through these steps until this round in 1995. And he said, so you've never admitted out loud in your own voice to another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. And I went, trying to figure out a way to say yes. No. He goes, good. You're going to do your 5th step tonight. Start with the resentment list. And I read the resentments to him, and he's making notes on his own sheet. And then he had me read the fears list. I had 19 of them. Then he had me read the sexual inventory, which was very boring to him. I thought it was terrific. And then I read the paragraph about the ideal relationship. She's got to be in AA. She's got to be a non-smoker. And we need to be able to talk about everything. Well, Forrest didn't like that last one, talk about everything. But I left it in because that's what I have today. I met my wife in AA. We're married 14 years. She's sober 35, going to be 36 next month. I'm 52, going to be 53 next month. So leaving that meeting, I had a list of my defects of character. And my assignment was to get a dictionary, which I consider the other big book, to look up these defects of character words. Now, I've been using these words for 24 years, really did not completely understand what they meant. So I looked them all up, wrote them out of my hand, my penmanship. And then in the 7th step, I used the 7-step prayer on each defect, plugged it in with the defect and the definition, and would read all the defects of character in the 7-step prayer through once. It takes about 15 minutes, morning, noon, and night. And I was to call Forrest and let him know what day I'm on. And towards the end of my 30 days, he was out on the road. The assignment was to do it 3 times a day for 30 days. If I missed a day or missed a time, I would have to start over. I didn't miss a day or a time. But he was out on the road, and I called his sponsor, and his sponsor told me to just keep doing it. So I did that for 53 days. And I'm telling you, it was like a college education about life. They should teach that in schools, but of course, anything that makes sense doesn't get taught in schools. So after I had finished my defects prayer list 7, I was prepared for 8 and 9. Basically, I had made amends to everybody in 8 and 9 except for the number 1 guy, which was Kevin, the band leader who took me out on the road with him back in the story earlier. I had put him on every list. He was number 1 on every list because I resented him and I had judged him, and I was afraid of him, and I was envious, and a litany of defects of character up and running, pulling at me. And Forrest said to me, well, why haven't you made amends? And I told him, every sponsor told me, just take him off the list, leave him alone. That'll be your amends, leaving him alone. Well, Forrest said, that's not going to hold water today. You have until midnight tomorrow to find him and make amends to him, even if you have to fly to New York to do so. I'll give you one caveat. Do you know where he is now? Yes. That's why you have to make amends, because he's in your head. You've been dragging him. When was the last time you saw him? 35 years ago. See, you've been dragging him around. You got to fix this. Here's what you do. You call all your numbers that you have for him. And if you can get him live, you can make amends to him on the phone. If not, you're on a plane tomorrow to New York. Forrest grew up in New York, so he knew everything about New York. So I made all sorts of calls, left all sorts of messages. Nothing. I set my phone for 5:45 because I knew I would have to go over and buy a ticket and get ready to go to New York. And at 3:30 in the morning, Kevin called. And I made amends to him on the phone. I have judged you. I have resented you. I'm envious of your success. I'm jealous of the way you do business. I have fear when I'm in your presence. And I gossip about you. And if any of this has ever gotten back to you, I hope to be forgiven. How can I make this right? Silence. He said, well, you were helpful, but you were a pain in the ass. And then we began to talk about Jerry Garcia going back out on the road with the Grateful Dead. And Jerry was in a flop house out there trying to dry out. Jerry Garcia's problem was booze. He never had a drug problem, although he used drugs a lot. His problem was booze, and he died withdrawing from alcohol. And we talked all about him going back out on the road, which I knew probably wouldn't happen. And at the end of the, okay, if you're back in New York, come up to my club. Good, great, okay, boom, boom, bye. Done. Turned the alarm off, rolled over, went back to sleep. Forrest called me at 6 in the morning. He goes, did you get him? I go, yeah. Can you make amends to him? Yep. Good. Now, I noticed that you have 5 or 6 tour speakers that go out and speak at the conferences. Any of them on the West Coast? Yeah, Johnny. You know Johnny, Glenn. And he goes, well, same question. Do you know where he is? I go, well, yeah, he's in the Bellflower area. He goes to the Bellflower group in Long Beach. His open meeting is tonight at 8 o'clock. He goes, good. You can drive down there and go to a diner and get a nice meal and find him. Well, you know what to do. Click. Drove down, found Johnny, pulled him out of the meeting, made amends to him. He said, you got a great sponsor. Keep doing whatever he tells you to do. I got to go back in because I got newcomers from the federal prison here tonight. And check. I made amends to Clancy 3 weeks later. He was coming through Phoenix. I was down there on an archival journey. You know Wally Patton, right, Glenn? He's an archivist down in that area. And he had a house full of books, probably 100,000 books in his house. And I put together a library for him. Lived there and bought bookcases and sorted things. And he had hundreds of big books. And while there, I heard about Clancy coming through Phoenix. So we were in, what's the other town in that area? Well, anyway, met Clancy, pulled him out of the meeting, made amends to him. He goes, keep doing your work. You're one of the few that's ever made amends to me. I've been in AA a long time, and you're one of the few people, probably 4 people, who have made amends to me. Keep doing what you're doing. And once I finished that list, the 10th step, I do a written 10th step. I keep the written 10th step paper cut in the size of a dollar bill, and I keep it with my money to add to and take away from. Very helpful to write stuff down. Very helpful to read it out loud in my own voice to myself. 11th step, we do. We have a book reading meeting that we run here at the house on Sunday nights. And we've read probably 20, 25 books. Emmett Fox, Joel Goldsmith, M. Scott Peck, Neil Donald Walsh. Terrific spiritual broadening, continuing to make my connection to the higher power much more wholesome and connected. And I do prayer and meditation. I listen a lot. And I've just done the 12th step, and that's under 50 minutes, right, Glenn? I'm done.